So then the final thing, I think, to talk about then, I'm not skipping anything, is Israel. All right? And so let me give you a little background of where this came from and what it started. For, I don't know how many years, maybe, I don't know, 16 years or so, Fellowship Bible Church has been doing a Israel trip about every other year. Those trips have been being led by Donton Hartog and Charlie Spencer. And so they've been doing these Israel trips where they, members of FBC sign up. There's classes that they take that Don teaches leading up to the trip, and then they go and they do a tour of Israel, primarily being taught by an FBC pastor, but also a local tour guide helping to set some of the geographical and historical context as you do the tour of Israel. I got to go on my first one with that group last year. And as the new youth pastor, my whole time I was there going through on this Israel tour, everywhere I was at, I was like, man, how do we... It was so impactful to me personally to stand in these places, to see these things. It just is... It's just an experience you can't describe, and I was loving it. And the thought that I kept hearing in my ears as I was there is, how do I get youth to come? And it's not that there weren't any youth. There were a few youth on that trip, but to be honest with you, it was mostly retired, older crowd. All right, they're the ones that maybe had the extra money or the time to be able to make a trip like that. And so the whole time there, I'm like, man, if we had a group of youth here, we could go do this other little thing, or we would do something a little bit differently. And man, the impact you can have on a young person. And the thought I came back with is, if you could send your student to do an Israel trip, you are locking down, at a minimum, the spiritual impact is you're going to lock down in the mind of your kid the historical narratives. It's hard to doubt the historical accuracy, the historical narratives of Scripture when you've been there, and you've seen it, and you've walked it, and you've touched it, you've smelled it, you've felt it. And it's just the impact we could have on our youth. And so I started just praying about this and talking to Dawn and Charlie and put it to the elders of, hey, I really want to start promoting this to our youth. I know it's expensive and it's hard to do, and it's but how can we get there? So this trip is the first kind of baby step towards doing that. And so what the elders approved and Charlie and Dawn and I came up with was, for this Israel trip at the end of 2019, we were going to do a 2-bus trip. And instead of saying it's a youth trip and an old person trip, now that's not the way we wanted to advertise it. That's not the way it's being promoted. The way it's being promoted is that the one bus is going to be the traditional tour that has really always been done, except Dawn wanted to make it the teaching focus of it is going to be prophecy and end times, which is going to be awesome. I mean, you just can't. It will come alive for you to stand on the Mount of Olives and hear Dawn's lesson on what's going to happen there in one day. I mean, that's just a really cool bus to be a part of. So I'm not knocking that bus. The other bus will be what we're calling the adventure bus. This bus will we're not going to have the long teaching times at each site. We're going to have devotional, and there's going to be teaching time, so I'm not saying there won't be. But we're going to take opportunity to be a little more exploring in nature at each one of the sites. I got itineraries here for you to look at if you're interested in Israel. But each day you can see some of the things. So, for example, when we get to Caesarea Philippi, we're going to stand there and see where Jesus said, "On this rock I will build my church." And we're going to learn a lesson on that. But when the prophecy bus, they're going to stay and they're going to do a longer teaching time and thinking about some end time implications of that spot. The adventure bus is going to take a hike, and we're going to go around the mountain to Nimrod's ancient fortress. And that fortress is one where there are hidden passages and rocks and ruins, and we're going to just explore, and we're going to touch and feel and be there in Nimrod's fort. So that's going to be the difference between the two buses. The adventure bus is a little more walking. When we get to En Gedi, we're going to walk up into the spring of En Gedi, up to the waterfalls, where you can see from there the caves that David hid out when he was hiding from Saul. And so those are the differences between the two trips. And I have the current draft of the itinerary, what's going to be going on each day for the adventure bus here. Basically, both buses are hitting the same spots. There's a couple spots where it will part ways a little bit, but every evening we're staying in the same hotel, we're eating the same food, we're going to be interacting between the two buses a whole lot. So it is okay to split your family up. You're going to be together all the time, but if you want to split up, that's okay. But here's what I want to emphasize with you all as parents. If you can't do this trip, my prayer is that God works this into a long-term thing where we start making it more and more of a youth thing, because I really see the value and the impact we can have in our youth by doing an Israel trip. So be praying about that for the future. So where was I going with that? I lost my train of thought for some reason. Anyway, so that's the Israel trip. That is the goal of it. We're already at, I believe, 35 people signed up for the adventure bus. So there's only like 10 slots left. And I know on the website it's going to say your deadline. This is the website you go to if you want to register and get more information. The cost is $47.50, I believe. That includes flight, and that includes your the food and everything there. Almost all the food. There's a few lunches you have to pay for while we're out and about. But the hotels, the tours, all of it. And so this is where you go to get all of that information that can't be reached. Hopefully that's not the case. That was something I wanted to say. So for this trip, you can, and there is at least one already that you can send. And I know how hard this is for families because of the cost. I mean, everybody would love for your whole family to go, but that just isn't realistic most of the time. But maybe you can raise enough money to send your student. And so we're handling it similar to how we would handle an international youth, like a mission trip, where the leader of the trip, myself and my wife will be on this trip. We will take guardianship of your youth, and they will be on the trip with us. Same as if you were sending them on a mission trip and not going with them, you can send your youth on this trip. Your student can go on this trip without you as parents, similar to if they were going on a mission trip. We will we'll have all the medical release forms, all the paperwork in place, and your student can come on this trip. And they're part of the whole, they'll be in the buses and going through all of that together. So if at all possible, consider doing that. Think about it. If you can't now, I encourage you to think about someday. I mean, I'm not here to bash us old people, but for me, over there in Israel, the impact I felt on myself, the impact I saw on other people, I'm thinking, man, I would have loved to see that impact when a kid is 16, when they're 17, to have that sort of experience, to lock down for them through those early adult years, the experience of being there and walk in the footsteps of Jesus. I mean, it's just an incredible thing. And I think it's an investment in your student that if there is, you find a way to do it, and I know it's hard. I think it's worth striving for. So, yeah.
So will they do it again in 2 years of 2021?
My prayer is yes, and my prayer for the future, and you can all join me in this. But my prayer for the future is, instead of doing this 2-bus kind of a thing, that maybe we make it more of a youth thing. If we were doing it just as a youth thing, there are some costs we could maybe shed. The youth they can eat peanut butter and jelly. They don't need to eat the fancy, the buffets. We're going to be eating good and sleeping nice on this trip. We're going to be staying in nice hotels, eating some awesome food. And I like that. But for the sake of trying to encourage more youth to come, I'm willing to eat peanut butter and jelly if that's what it takes. And maybe try to cut some of those costs, maybe stay in a lower budget, hostel type of thing, and go into the, that. So my prayer is down the road that maybe that God would turn into that, but I don't know. I mean, I just don't know. There's not that right now. What the elders have approved and what we're doing is this. We're doing this model. But I'm just being honest with you, where I'm praying that this goes is that we shift it more and more to where we're doing a youth Israel trip, all right? So, any other questions on Israel? I have some of the itineraries up here, so it'll give you more details. You can see some of the things the adventure bus is going to be doing. I didn't print out one for the prophecy bus. Basically, the locations are the same, but some of the activities are very different. So, for example, when we hike down the Mount of Olives, we're going to spend some time in the Garden of Gethsemane. The prophecy bus will stay on the Mount of Olives longer, but we're going to walk all the way down into the Kidron Valley. We're going to go to Absalom's tomb, and we're going to go on a camel ride at Absalom's tomb in the Kidron Valley. So that's the adventure bus is going to do that, while the prophecy bus is understanding more about the Mount of Olives as it relates to end times prophecy. Actually standing in those places. So I'm not knocking that. I wish I could do both. I mean, I want to hear the teachings on that too. So that's going to be a neat experience for families able to do it. So, any other Israel questions? Mike?
Well, I just want to say I've been twice, and both times I've taken the first time was my 14-year-old daughter Hannah, who's now 22, and Josh went last year with us, and it was impactful on both of them. Hannah particularly. Hannah wants now to go live in Israel. That's her ultimate life goal is to be in Israel.
Right.
But it's incredible. Last year after we came back, I was in the office. I teach Cape Bridge Middle School, Cape Bridge, and I was in the school office. The UPS driver came in, and he had just come back from a trip to Israel. And his comment was, when people asked him how it was, go. You have to go.
It is. On last year's trip, one of the teenage girls that was with us on the trip, sitting in the Garden of Gethsemane, we'll have time for meditation and prayer, just sitting alone in the Garden of Gethsemane. I mean, and just considering where you are and what happened there. And it was at that moment for this particular teenage girl that was with us last year, who she just it overwhelmed her in that moment that it was all true. I mean, so she came to faith sitting there in the Garden of Gethsemane last year on that trip. I mean, it can be that impactful. Any other questions about Israel? Caleb, you had a question? No?
Dennis, the deposit deadlines are later this year, but the spots are filling up.
Yeah,
right?
good point. So the deposit, if you read the website, I think they list the deposit is due like August, but I'm telling you now that the bus will fill up. So the real deadline, so that you don't get on a waiting list, is when it's first come, first served. So whenever that last spot is filled, after that people will go on the waiting list. So the real deadline is probably February, March, by the time that bus is full. So if you can register before then, like I said, I think we're at like 35 or 36 as we sit here today.
And how many spots are there?
45. So that's why I said if you can't really wait till August if you're just wanting to wait till the last minute to register. I don't think that'll work. I think we'll be full well before then. And it'll be going on to the waiting list. Now, the prophecy bus so far right now, they're at less. They're at like 22 or 23 right now in the prophecy bus. So that one's still has some room. But that one will fill up too. Both these buses will fill up. I expect that. That's why I wanted to get the youth parents, because my job is to be focused on the youth, right? So that's why I wanted to have this and really encourage us as parents of students to really consider doing this. Any other Israel questions? All right. How about anything? The Maven Truth, the summer camps, the missions conference, or any of it? Any thoughts, comments, questions? Now, Caleb. All right.
For the Maven Truth, is it going to be at a college campus in DC, or is it just going to be in DC?
Yeah. So Maven is. Remember, it's new for Maven too. That they love. Unfortunately, there isn't quite a Berkeley on the East Coast. I mean, Berkeley, all summer long, you can go on campus, and there are thousands of students on campus. So you can go to Berkeley's campus every day for a week, and you're not going to see the same person twice, and you can do these worldview surveys. there isn't quite the exact replica of that on the East Coast. So Maven is trying to figure out how the week is going to play out. So probably it's going to be like one day at like a Georgetown campus, another day maybe on the Washington Mall, another day maybe on a different campus, all right there around in the DC area. So those details between Stephen and Maven, Truth is really working on ironing out what exactly those details are going to be.
But where are they gonna sleep? Like,
There's a host church, and they've identified 3 host churches already that have volunteered. So similar in size to FBC, because there's some requirements, like they gotta have showers and bathroom spaces and a kitchen that we can use. So we're gonna be going and staying at the host church. So we will be sleeping bags, air mattresses, camping out in their church, using their kitchen, using their facilities for that week, and then going out and doing the training there, and then going out into that'll be our hub to going out. So we will purchase our own food, we'll use the kitchen, we'll be making our meals there, and then going out there. So we'll be staying at a host church. Good question. Oh, thank you. I told you to remind me. Good job. All right, so I did, Reagan, thank you for reminding me. There is an international youth mission. It's not, and it always slips my mind, so forgive me for this, because it's not something that we as a youth department are in charge of coordinating, but we want to encourage you. Like Courtney said, you can't do all of these things as a family. We understand that. We're just showing you what the opportunities are. Every family has to kind of decide what you're able or what you want to do. Another one of those opportunities that I just want to mention briefly is, and it's not focused on youth, but we want to encourage youth and families to go participate in it. But it's a church-wide ministry that we've been doing every year to, how many years have we been doing it now? 4 or 5? 5 years? We've been sending teams to China to run and actually Natalie can probably, and Reagan can speak to it way better than I, because you've done it, how many times have you gone? We've gone 4 times, so they're like in the know on this. But we send teams over there to run like a English camp for children in China, and so they teach. They're ostensibly there to teach English, but teach American culture. But in the context of American culture, they're able to weave in the gospel and what it is that they believe through holidays that America celebrates, like Christmas and Easter, and so they're able to share the gospel in that way. But it is an English camp that they're there to do, and this is a church FBC ministry, so the FBC Missions heads this up. But we as a youth department want to encourage you to consider that, be a part of that. It's just that Courtney and I don't have any coordination responsibilities for that, but it is something that our church does and something that can be very impactful for your youth. These 2 ladies could tell you the impact it's had on them. They have a real heart for China and for that ministry, and have been there a number of times and part of it. So, and there may be others in here that have participated
who would
in
you
that.
contact?
What's that?
Who do you contact for that? It might be.
Yeah, Chris Ryder is he is one of the point people for that, and Jim Poole and the missions department coordinate that. So between Chris Ryder and Jim Poole and
I
maybe
just
the
spoke to Chris and he said there'll be an informational meeting probably in February.
yeah. So watch the bulletin for that, because there will be information coming out from a church standpoint for China. I mean, they don't advertise it specifically for youth; it's for the church, for families. But as the youth pastor, I want to encourage you, if you can send your youth on that, that's an awesome trip, and can be a great experience for your students.
Do you know the dates of that yet? Did I know?
July 18th to 31st.
July 18th.
And what city do they go to?
Most likely Hohat will be the nearby city, but it's usually in a village near Hohat.
So that's the same time as our youth conference?
Yes.
Just so you're thinking of the dates there.
Yeah, it's end of July. All right. Thank you all for coming. Is there any other questions before I dismiss anybody on any of the stuff? I have flyers, and so if you want any particular information, come up and grab me here. Yeah.
I don't have the date calendar, but isn't there like a missions weekend on that date calendar? Is that not happening?
There's a mission overnighter. That's kind of a youth activity. That's not a.
All right.
Doesn't rise to the level of these other events. But yes, we will have a.
But it's still happening?
Yes, in March. That's in March. We do have a youth overnighter that has a missions focus this year. So yes. All right, thank you all for coming. Thank you very much.